we have Brett Baer.
That's true. He's not on the field, Dana. Thank you. This is a Fox News Alert. I'm Brett Baer in Washington. We begin tonight with a skirmish, if not an outright battle, between two presidents. Today, former President Obama unleashed a scathing attack on his successor and the Republican Party during a long speech marking his re-entry into election year politics. The current commander-in-chief responded moments later with humor instead of venom. We have Fox team coverage tonight. John Roberts at the White House also has details on the president's efforts to try to find out who wrote that New York Times op-ed about a resistance within the administration. We start off, though, with correspondent Doug McKelway and some executive-level trash talking. Good evening, Doug.
Good evening, Brett. Honoring a tradition that began with George Washington, former President Barack Obama has largely remained out of the political fray. Today, 2 months before the midterms, that changed, leading to a bare-knuckles brawl between the former president and his successor.
It did not start with Donald Trump. He is a symptom, not the cause.
It was the first time President Obama used Trump's name and his party in an outright verbal attack. He told University of Illinois students they've grown up in a time of economic upheaval that wiped away many jobs. But the resultant bitterness came to roost in just one political party.
Over the past few decades, the politics of division and resentment and paranoia has unfortunately found a home in the Republican Party.
Hours later, also speaking in the Midwest, President Trump fired back.
I'm sorry I watched it, but I fell asleep. I found he's very good for sleeping.
On a day when the latest numbers showed 201,000 jobs added in August, unemployment near an 18-year low, and the largest increase in worker pay since the end of the recession, Mr. Obama said Republicans should not be taking credit.
Suddenly, Republicans are saying it's a miracle. I have to kind of remind them, actually, those job numbers are the same as they were in 2015. In 2016.
If the Democrats got in with their agenda in November of almost 2 years ago, instead of having 4.2 up, I believe honestly you'd have 4.2 down. You'd be negative.
Mr. Obama said he inherited an economy that was losing 800,000 jobs a month and turned it around.
And by the time I left office, household income was near its all-time high, and the uninsured rate had hit an all-time low.
It was the weakest recovery we've ever had. It was barely a recovery. And now this is called not recovery, this is called rocket ship.
Mr. Obama also leveled attacks at the Trump environmental record.
They're subsidizing corporate polluters.
On its foreign policy.
They're undermining our alliances.
And on its attempts to dismantle Obamacare.
Their sabotage of the Affordable Care Act has already cost more than 3 million Americans their health insurance.
We wiped out the individual mandate, which is the most unpopular part of Obamacare. Isn't this much more exciting than listening to President Obama say? Because we get things done.
In Illinois, to accept an award for his ethics, Mr. Obama accused Trump of numerous ethics violations and abuses of power, provoking this retort from the RNC.
He said, in my DOJ, we didn't protect our friends. False. Loretta Lynch met on the tarmac with Bill Clinton just before Hillary Clinton was interviewed by the FBI.
Mr. Obama also noted that he frequently complained about Fox News while president, but that he never threatened to shut it down. His administration did, however, in 2009 threaten to remove Fox from White House pool duties. It was only when the White House Correspondents Association defended Fox that that threat was lifted. Brett?
More on this to the panel. Doug, thanks. President Trump is suggesting that his embattled attorney general should find out who wrote an op-ed piece alleging a resistance movement within his administration, and as you can imagine, that's causing quite a stir here in Washington. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts joins us tonight, as he often does, from the North Lawn. A little rainy there tonight. Good evening, John.
Rainy. We got thunderstorms, lightning, and a lot of loud bangs around here, so if you hear one, don't be surprised. President Trump has said on many occasions that he believes the Justice Department should be investigating the myriad bad actors who have been in his administration. Well, tonight you can add one more name, or at least the name so far anonymous, to that list. In an off-camera session with reporters aboard Air Force One today, President Trump took his outrage over the anonymous op-ed to a new level, revealing that he may want the Justice Department to get involved.
I would say Jeff should be investigating who the
author of that piece was, because I really believe it's national security.
And is there action that should be taken against the New York Times?
Well, we're going to see. I'm looking at that right now.
How are you
Totally
looking into
happy.
that?
But I'm looking. I am looking.
You said last night that it's treason. What happened? In this country, we can punish treason with the death penalty. Are you serious about that?
We're going to take a look at what he had, what he gave, what he's talking about, also where he is right now. Sources outside the White House say a short list of prime suspects has been compiled, though it may be a pre-existing list drawn up months ago of people who were suspected of leaking. It's unclear whether there would be any basis for an investigation by the DOJ. While the author of the op-ed did not appear to disclose any classified information, President Trump believes that the op-ed has revealed a potential national security threat if the writer was in any high-level meetings. Supposing I have a high-level national security meeting and he has got a clearance. You know, we talked about clearances a lot recently. And he goes into a high-level meeting concerning China or Russia or North Korea or something. And this guy goes in. I don't want him at those meetings. Democrats seized on the allegation in the op-ed that in the early days of the administration, cabinet members considered whether to invoke the 25th Amendment and remove President Trump from office.
If senior administration officials think that the President of the United States is not able to do his job, then they should invoke the 25th Amendment.
Aboard Air Force One, President Trump also weighed in on the Mueller investigation. Fox News reported on Wednesday that the president's attorneys were nearing an agreement to have him provide written answers to Robert Mueller, limited only to Russia and collusion. They're still weighing whether to allow Mueller any FaceTime with the president. President Trump indicated he's skeptical of sitting down with the special counsel. I don't want to be set up with a perjury trap. Number one. Number two, there was no obstruction and there was no collusion.
Any chance you do an interview, Mr. President?
Yeah, I mean, I do it under certain circumstances. I think it's a big waste of time. Rudy Giuliani told Fox News on Wednesday that the only way that he would allow the president to sit down with Mueller is if Robert Mueller were to make some sort of significant concession in the investigation, such as agreeing to bring the Russia investigation to a close just days after a face-to-face meeting with the president. Brett?
John Roberts, live on the North Lawn. John, thanks. This is another Fox News alert. Syria on the brink. Urgent concerns tonight that U.S. forces and Russian forces could get entangled in a shooting war, possibly on the ground in Syria. Syrian government troops backed by forces from Russia and Iran may be about to launch a final offensive designed to crush the remaining opposition in the country's 7-year civil war. The U.S. is warning of dire consequences if that assault happens and has mobilized. National Security Correspondent Jennifer Griffin has the latest tonight from the Pentagon.
A dangerous armed standoff tonight in southern Syria with U.S. and Russian forces warning each other to stand aside. In a rare show of force, a company of U.S. Marines carried out an air assault backed by artillery in the southern Syrian desert in what U.S. defense officials are calling a stern message to Russia: back off. That message ignored as the leaders of Iran, Russia, and Turkey met in Tehran today. A last-minute effort to hammer out a ceasefire failed as Russian President Vladimir Putin teamed up with Iran's President Hassan Rouhani, who said the fight in Syria should continue until all extremists are uprooted, and then called for the U.S. to leave the country.
The illegal presence and intervention by America in Syria, which has led to the continuation of instability, must immediately end.
We consider any assault on Idlib to be a dangerous escalation of the conflict in Syria. Airstrikes by Russia and the regime have already begun against civilian areas.
Idlib province is the last remaining rebel stronghold, home to 3 million people, nearly half of them civilians displaced from other parts of Syria, along with an estimated 10,000 hardcore al-Qaeda fighters. A Russian-backed assault has international aid groups and the Pentagon warning of massive civilian casualties and a flood of refugees across the border into Turkey. President Trump tweeted a warning on Monday. Quote, "The Russians and Iranians would be making a grave humanitarian mistake to take part in this potential human tragedy. Hundreds of thousands of people could be killed." Elsewhere in Syria, a separate military standoff. Twice in the past week, Russia has notified U.S. forces of its intent to enter the American-controlled zone around a U.S. garrison used to train anti-ISIS fighters. The U.S. has warned Russian forces not to move any closer to an agreed line of demarcation.
The U.S. military is prepared to back up its warning. Last February, U.S. helicopter gunships and jets killed roughly 300 Russian mercenaries as they approached another U.S. military base in Syria. The U.S. still has 2,000 troops in Syria. Brett?
Jennifer Griffin at the Pentagon. Jennifer, thank you. Back here in the U.S., a massive wildfire near the California-Oregon border will keep a stretch of Interstate 5 closed through the weekend. California Transportation Department says that blaze began Wednesday. It's still burning out of control all along the highway. It's destroyed thousands of trees that could fall onto the roadway. The highway traverses the entire west coast from Mexico to Canada. The confirmation hearing for Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh is over. The final day seemed more like an afterthought. Kavanaugh wasn't there. He wasn't supposed to be. His testimony finished last night. Chief legal correspondent and anchor of Fox News at Night, Shannon Bream, is here with a wrap-up of what we saw and heard. It was quite a week.
It was. And Brett, right now his supporters feel like there's almost no way he won't get confirmed. His critics, though, know they've got a tough job ahead to try to flip 2 Republicans to vote no. Of course, they are keeping an eye on these 2 senators, Senators Collins and Murkowski. Both of them have been very supportive of abortion rights. And I got to say, that was easily one of the top 2 issues Kavanaugh was asked most about this week. Again and again, he cited the precedential authority of Roe v. Wade when asked. The other big issue was the Mueller investigation and whether Kavanaugh will be fully independent from President Trump. Several Democrats asked Kavanaugh multiple times to pledge publicly that he'd recuse himself from any civil or criminal matter involving the president. He repeatedly declined, saying he wouldn't take any position on any issue that he may have to rule on as a justice. Also today, Senator Cory Booker continues to say he's putting his entire Senate career on the line by releasing documents in violation of Senate rules. After making quite a show of doing so late Thursday morning, only for committee staffers to reveal shortly after he did that the documents had been cleared for public release and that Booker had been notified of that hours in advance of his big reveal. Well, since then, Booker has continued to release additional documents not cleared for public consumption.
This is a fight. This is an unjust sham rule designed to try to prevent documents from being seen by the American people. And so I am standing on this hill, and if they want to kick me out of the Senate, so be it. Bring it.
So I asked GOP Senator Ben Sasse about Booker's actions and those of his Democratic counterparts on the Judiciary Committee this week.
The Senate as an institution is a joke too much of the time. And those hearings were a circus. And there was just so much nonsense, just consistent dishonesty in the way people would ask their questions.
Okay, so here's where we go now. Next up, we expect the committee will vote around September 20th, the full Senate vote within a week or so after that. By the way, Brett, the term starts for the Supreme Court October 1st. There's a timeline.
Pretty amazing. Today, they had Watergate figure John Dean testifying, the minority did. He said if this president shot somebody on Fifth Avenue in cold blood, Judge Kavanaugh would say that he couldn't be charged.
Yeah, what they're trying to do is extrapolate from a 2009 Law Review article that he wrote that he said you really have to think deeply about whether civil or criminal investigations should proceed against a sitting president.
But in testimony, he didn't say that.
Yeah, and he never said that that any president can get away. In fact, he repeatedly said no one is above the law when he was pressed about President Trump. And by the way, he says Congress ultimately has the power to impeach anybody that they feel is no longer able or worthy to be president.
We will follow it all and see you tonight at 11.
See you then.
Thanks, Shannon. Up next is a new administration effort to put your health care information on the cloud. A good idea. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 4 in Dallas has an off-duty police officer fatally shoots a man after walking into the wrong apartment in her building. Police say the officer entered what she believed was her own apartment. When she saw a man who she didn't recognize, she shot him. Police would not say whether she fired her weapon because she thought the man was an intruder or for some other reason. That investigation is continuing. Q13 Fox in Seattle as a heavily armed gunman wearing body armor is shot and taken into custody after taking hostage at the used car dealership. Police say the hostages escaped. The gunman exchanged fire with deputies and took a bullet to the chest, which was stopped by the armor. And this is a live look at Chicago from Fox 32. One of the big stories there tonight, a 3-alarm fire in the South Shore neighborhood on the south side of Chicago leaves 6 people injured, including a firefighter. State Fire Marshal was called to the scene after firefighters found evidence of arson. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back.
Work hard to protect this tuchus. To take care of any messy situation.
Shares of electric car maker Tesla tumbled about 7% today as the markets opened after CEO Elon Musk appeared to smoke marijuana during an interview. It happened on a podcast shown on YouTube. Musk inhales from what host Joe Rogan says is a combined marijuana tobacco joint. Rogan says it was legal. Tesla did not comment. Stocks overall were down today. The Dow lost 79. The S&P 500 fell 6. The Nasdaq dropped 20. For the week, the Dow lost a fraction. The S&P 500 was down 1 percentage point. The Nasdaq was off 2.5. Millions of people covered under the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, will see only modest premium increases next year. Record keeping by using the cloud. Is that a good idea? Correspondent Jillian Turner takes a look.
This initiative aims to put health care data as much as possible in the hands of patients themselves.
The Trump administration's announced plans to partner with the tech industry to make health data more easily accessible to patients and transferable among healthcare providers. The goal? To revolutionize the way Americans manage their health. The big idea is to make it easier, faster, and cheaper to transfer patient information between doctors, providers, and insurers. But the key to all this? Cloud technology. And that's where companies like Amazon, Google, IBM, and Microsoft come into play. The federal government's been trying to force American healthcare to go digital since 2014, when the Obama administration mandated all healthcare providers use the electronic health record system. But according to healthcare experts, the current system is failed and wasteful.
Today, the majority of medical records are still shared by fax, not through the electronic medical record system.
Critics call the government's end goal a $30 billion unicorn, and cybersecurity experts echo those concerns.
My concern is building one massive system never works. If it was easy to do and if it could have been done, it would have been done with the $30 billion that's already been spent on it.
When it comes to the government's new partnership with the tech sector, experts are ringing alarm bells about patient data privacy.
According to the federal government, there are 2.2 million entities that can have access to our information. Now, the patients are not involved in that at all.
Cyber experts are also concerned about data security. They insist that if the government and tech sector are going to share Americans' health data, they have an obligation to protect it. They say the first priority should be to harden the record system against hacks, both domestic and foreign. Brett?
Jillian, thank you. Up next, another associate of President Trump is headed to jail, but not for too long. We'll explain. First, beyond our borders tonight, the Army says it is expanding its troop presence by adding 1,500 soldiers to its forces in Germany. Personnel include a field artillery brigade headquarters, 2 multiple launch rocket system battalions, a short-range air defense battalion, and various supporting units. Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte has decided not to seek the arrest of an opposition senator who has taken refuge in the Senate without a court warrant. The defiant lawmaker had asked the Philippine Supreme Court to declare Duterte's order illegal. The lawmaker has accused the president of large-scale corruption and involvement in illegal drugs and extrajudicial killings. Hackers obtained the credit card details of some 380,000 British Airways travelers during a 2-week data breach this summer. The airline says the incident leaves the customers vulnerable to financial fraud. It advises people to contact their bank or credit card company if they use that airline's website and mobile app to make or change a booking between August 21st and September 5th. I may have. All right, just some of the other stories beyond our borders. We'll be right back. Former Trump campaign aide George Papadopoulos will spend 2 weeks in jail. He was sentenced today after pleading guilty to lying to federal agents. Prosecutors wanted more time. A short time ago, President Trump tweeted 14 days for $28 million, $2 million a day. No collusion, a great day for America. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge was in the courtroom today for that sentencing. She joins us now. Good evening, Catherine.
Well, thank you, Brennan. Good evening. Calling it a serious offense, the federal judge said he reduced the jail time because he felt the former Trump campaign aide was genuinely remorseful about his lies to the FBI. Papadopoulos, whose eyes were red and swollen after the hearing, briefly addressed the court, saying, "I made a terrible mistake. I have paid dearly, and I feel terribly ashamed. I hope to have a second chance to redeem myself." Special counsel prosecutors wanted a longer sentence, telling the court Papadopoulos lied repeatedly and took 6 months to correct the record about his contact with an overseas professor in the spring of 2016 when this national security meeting was held, and his efforts to broker a meeting with Russian officials. In a CNN interview before sentencing, Papadopoulos said he brought up the possibility of a photo op.
I looked at candidate Trump directly in his eyes and said, I can do this for you if it's in your interest and if it's in the campaign's interest. The collective energy in the room seemed to be interested.
The judge concluded Papadopoulos had no desire to help the Russians and hurt U.S. national security, but he said he was blinded by his loyalty to the president and his ambition to secure a job in the Trump administration, Brett.
Catherine, what can you tell us about the grand jury proceeding involving the former FBI deputy director?
Well, the lawyer for Andrew McCabe called the grand jury a procedural step and then blamed the administration for leaking the secret proceeding, calling the disclosure, quote, a sad and poorly veiled attempt to try to distract the American public. We remain confident that a thorough review of the facts and circumstances related to this matter will demonstrate that there is no basis on which criminal charges should be brought. As you know, earlier this year, the Justice Department's internal watchdog found McCabe lied to federal investigators about his role in a leak to the Wall Street Journal about the Clinton Foundation investigation. McCabe has claimed that former Director Comey knew about his contact with reporters, but Comey wants to distance himself from leaks because McCabe believes Comey is also under investigation for leaking, Brett.
Catherine, thank you.
You're welcome.
In our Whatever Happened To segment tonight, the 9/11 Victims Compensation Fund. It has already spent billions to help first responders to the disaster, but the program will soon come to an end. Senior correspondent Rick Leventhal reports tonight from Manhattan.
When two hijacked passenger jets smashed into the Twin Towers on 9/11/2001, the result was death, destruction, and chaos on an almost unthinkable scale. And while most people did all they could to escape Lower Manhattan, thousands of brave volunteers and first responders, firefighters, police officers, and federal agents raced to the scene, sacrificing their own safety to try and save others. And thousands of men and women stayed at Ground Zero for weeks and months after the terror attack, painstakingly searching for remains and clearing the piles of rubble and debris, with no idea the air they were breathing was a toxic mess of burning asbestos, computer parts, jet fuel, and countless other chemicals that would eventually make far too many of them deathly ill.
Lower Manhattan evolved into a cesspool of cancer.
The number of people who've died since 9/11 from exposure to those poisonous elements will soon surpass the number who died on that awful day.
We're all mortals, and we're all vulnerable, and we're learning more and more how lethal the impact can be.
A victims' compensation fund was created by Congress soon after the attack, but stopped paying benefits in 2004. After years of struggles, the Zadroga Act passed in 2010, providing more than $4 billion in medical exams and treatment for close to 90,000 people, including more than 8,000 claims filed in the past year. But the program is slated to end in December of 2020. This is why the Department of Justice held a public forum inside the 9/11 Museum Friday to remind federal agents and others exposed at Ground Zero to sign up now, even if they're not sick yet.
In just the past 6 months, I've attended the memorial services of not one, not two, but 3 FBI agents who served as first responders.
Anyone exposed to the toxic clouds could be sick and could be eligible for benefits, but the ones who need help the most are often the most reluctant to ask for it.
Sometimes in the rapid pace of life, we're more focused on helping out others, helping the community, helping and supporting our families, and we tend to set our own wellness aside.
If you or anyone you know was here that day or lived through the aftermath in Lower Manhattan, you're encouraged to check the website, VCF4VictimsCompensationFund.gov. Brett?
We'll put that on the website, too, our website. Rick, thank you. The president continues the search for Anonymous as part of a controversial and troublesome week for the administration, plus a former president weighs in. We'll get a reaction to all of it from the panel after a break.
We have the best economy in history.
When you hear how great the economy is doing right now, let's just remember when this recovery started.
More than 4 million jobs created since the election.
I had to kind of remind them, actually, those job numbers are the same as they were in 2015. In 2016.
I think he was trying to take some credit. He was trying to take credit for this incredible thing that's happening to our country.
It did not start with Donald Trump. He is a symptom, not the cause. He's just capitalizing on resentments that politicians have been fanning for years.
I'm sorry I watched it, but I fell asleep. I found he's very good for sleeping.
Former President Obama getting into the campaign swing as current President Trump responds almost real time. Let's bring in our panel and start there. Jason Riley, Wall Street Journal columnist and senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute. Molly Hemingway, senior editor at The Federalist. And Charles Lane, opinion writer for The Washington Post. Well, it was former President Obama's first kind of going out there, specifically targeting President Trump. Your thoughts on his message and how that translates?
Well, he might be the best thing that the Democrats have going for them. He's still extremely popular in the party and in the country, frankly. And he's going to give it everything he's got for the midterms. So I'm not surprised to see him do this. It is a little bit out of the norm. Previous administrations tend to stay quiet. Obama's chosen not to take that path. I guess it's another example of how all norms are off the table, whether we're talking about how the media is going to treat this president or whether we're talking about how former presidents are going to treat this president.
Politically?
Well, I just want to say that that is an important point. We're told that Donald Trump is the only person who violates norms or does anything differently. And we do have a norm in this country that presidents usually speak well of their successors. You saw George W. Bush do that throughout Or they're silent. George W. Bush did that through all 8 years of the Obama presidency. It's an absolutely free country and people should be free to say whatever they want. But I think a lot of people notice that people seem to be breaking a lot of norms along with President Trump. And it is good for the Democrats to have someone like Obama coming and trying to rally the vote, but in the same way that President Trump seems to excite both his base and his opponents, the same is absolutely true for President Obama. People in the Democratic Party love to hear him speak. People in the Republican Party are reminded why they voted for Donald Trump or what they didn't like about President Obama.
Chuck.
Well, the catch-22 in a way here for President Obama is that if he were to go out on the campaign trail and not mention Donald Trump, no one would be interested because the whole election is a referendum on Donald Trump. And the most motivating campaign theme for Democratic voters is resistance to Donald Trump. So in a way, there's no point campaigning unless you're going to break this long-standing norm because it's the only issue in the campaign. I tend to agree with, I guess, both of my colleagues here that it's possibly a net plus for the Democrats to have him back out on the trail, particularly among African-American voters who are going to be a key part of their coalition in some of these southern states. So I think we're going to see more of him.
Here he is talking about media.
I complained plenty about Fox News, but you never heard me threaten to shut them down or call them enemies of the people.
Now, he had some interesting lines there, Jason. This is not whataboutism. It is just truth. His attorney general obviously called one of our reporters a co-conspirator, James Rosen, and a flight risk. And, there are different things here that, you kind of have to fact check. We are trying to fact check to the current administration. But that speech, there was some interesting moments.
Well, I guess the biggest pushback I would have to what President Obama just said was that he didn't have to worry about criticism coming out of Fox News because he had every other network in his pocket for 8 years, just like previous Democrats have had. So the idea that he wasn't overly concerned with what Fox was saying, to the extent that it was true, and as you just said, it's not entirely true. When you have every other major news organ in the country on your side, yes, you don't have to worry about these things.
And that doesn't exclude the enemy of the people rhetoric from the president.
Look, I mean, coming from a newspaper that's taken its share of blows, fair and unfair, from mostly unfair, I would say, from this president, I would say what I think, independently of what he said about Fox here and there, it is a fact, you can look it up, that Barack Obama repeatedly told audiences that they should read both the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal editorial page. He said you should watch this network, you should watch that network, you should try and get both sides, you should get outside of your bubble. He told student groups, I believe Howard University was one, he rebuked them for not permitting certain controversial speakers. He supported the idea that conservatives should have free speech on campus. I think repeatedly stuck his neck out. And so I don't really think there's any comparison on that point.
That is not my recollection at all of the 8 years under President Obama, including that he blamed many bad things in the country on people watching Fox News. He claimed it was on every bar in the country, and that's why Democrats were hurt. He tried to freeze out Fox News in multiple instances. He spied on reporters. He's one of the worst presidents when it comes to actual actions when it comes to the media. President Donald Trump speaks against freedom of the press, or speaks against the press in a way that does not live up to what we would hope to hear in terms of support of freedom of the press. But when it comes to actual actions taken against the media, the Obama administration was bad, and the media didn't care. And when Donald Trump lightly criticizes the press,
of course the media
criticizes the press, they boycott him, they cancel the White House press, they freak out about the press dinner, and it is that difference in how they reacted to criticism by President Obama toward press to how they react to criticism
when
of Trump
Fox was
so
quote unquote frozen out of the White House correspondence, Brett, you check me on this, the rest of the media came to Fox.
It's the White House pool, yeah.
Yes.
But the point is that
Fox did recently to CNN.
Correct. When it comes to actual actions taken and attempts to spy on reporters or go after them, the Obama administration was very bad, and the media didn't have the same reaction to it that they do to the Trump administration.
I want to turn topics really quickly, and that is the president saying that the Attorney General should be investigating who the author of this op-ed, anonymous op-ed is. Jason?
No, I disagree that the Attorney General should spend time doing this, Brett. I think that the president is legitimately concerned that someone supposedly in his inner circle has done this. It's something I'd be upset about too. All of us would, but whether it rises to the level of an investigation by the Attorney General, I don't think that's the case.
No, but the Attorney General should be investigating all the leaks that we have seen coming out of this administration for 2 years that go against the Trump administration. And that's something we haven't seen any evidence that there's been any investigation of the criminal leaking against Mike Flynn, for instance.
Poor Jeff Sessions cannot get a break. The president just keeps on trolling him and harassing him, giving him more impossible things to do.
Although he said he's going to make it through the midterms at least, is what he has said. Next up, the Friday lightning round, Syria, the economy, winners and losers.
Wages are growing at the fastest pace in nearly a decade. And what happened this morning? Did you hear that? 2.9%. It's like the best wage number that we've had in many, many years.
You got to add that to the growth in hours worked. You follow me? So when you do that, you got 5% quote wage proxy, wage income proxy for working folks.
Well, calling the jobs report today very positive at the administration, at the White House. The jobs report, unemployment rate 3.9%, jobs added 201,000, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And you just heard there the hourly wage up 2.9% from the year earlier, which is really something that had been talked about as not happening for some time. Now it's happening. We're back with the panel. Lightning round, Jason.
Yes, more evidence that faster growth is flowing to workers, Brett. More evidence that 2% growth was not the new normal, as some people claimed, or that this wage stagnation was here to stay for a while. It was not the case. The best news in this is the increase in the hourly raises. It means people are getting pay raises after a long time. The labor market is now so tight that the only way employers can hang on to workers is to pay them more money. This is what we want to see.
Chuck?
Well, you know what? I'm going to settle this argument and say that both President Trump and President Obama deserve some credit for this, and because in different ways their policies contributed to the recovery and the growth we're seeing now. But I think we have to leave a lot of credit for the Federal Reserve, who did the right thing in the wake of the collapse in 2008, 2009. And now it's going to be on them to make a very important and what will ultimately be politically charged decision about how fast to let growth keep going. Right now it seems like they're on course to raise rates a few more times this year, and I think this report will not do anything to change that strategy. So we could be looking at 3% growth for the full year.
All right, meantime, in Syria, this could be a big weekend, and there could be a situation where U.S. and Russian forces get entangled. Take a listen to the UN ambassador.
We consider any assault on Idlib to be a dangerous escalation of the conflict in Syria. If Assad, Russia, and Iran continue, the consequences will be dire.
The illegal presence and intervention by America in Syria, which has led to the continuation of instability, must immediately end.
So there is the deal. Idlib could be this weekend.
And it's a huge humanitarian crisis. There are so many people who have fled there from other regions in Syria, and Assad says that he's going to go and try and take this place, and there are so many people that could be hurt. Our problem is that we don't have good relationships with Russia, so we can't do anything to get them to back off, and they're helping out Assad. And we don't have very good relations with Turkey right now. We do need to work and support Turkey as they try to keep Idlib from falling prey.
We'll follow it. There's U.S. forces on the ground as well. Winners and losers. Winner first.
My winner is Senate Judiciary Chairman Chuck Grassley, who has somehow managed to keep his cool this week as Democrats have made a circus of the Supreme Court nomination process. My loser is Nike. The new ad featuring Colin Kaepernick is hurting Nike's brand with consumers, at least according to the most recent polling.
Winner and loser.
I liked Representative Billy Long. He faced a protester in his hearing, and he handled it really well. He has a background as an auctioneer, and he just began doing his trade. And
we played some of that. It was quite something.
Great way to diffuse the situation. And my loser is the Never Trump resistance. They went public in the pages of the New York Times this week. They openly admitted that they are engaging in unconstitutional, non-transparent, anti-democratic practices to undermine the will of the people. And it confirms everything that Trump has said about the swamp, and it was a really poorly thought out stunt.
Winner and loser.
My winner, I would have thought it was obvious, Judge Brett Kavanaugh, who came through this very intense and at times unruly process pretty much intact. He may have slipped up here and there, had a tight corner here and there, but basically unscathed, and seems to be on his way to being confirmed for the Supreme Court. My loser, Republican candidates around the country. We're looking at recent poll results that show Andrew Gillum, the Democrat, leading for governor in Florida. Stacey Abrams, the Democrat, tied with Brian Kemp in Georgia. The Georgia Republicans were very confident about that. Brian Donnelly, the Democrat, leading for Senate in Indiana. I don't think you have this for your graphic, but Phil Bredesen is leading in Tennessee. The Republicans in the South and the Midwest in a little bit of trouble.
We will have more on all those races coming up as we take special report on the road around the country. Panel, thank you. When we come back, notable quotables.